Hi everyone, I'm Ravi Kapur. Welcome to this very special mayoral debate featuring the two candidates running for mayor in the city of San Jose. Very glad to have both Cindy Chavez and Matt Mahan here in San Jose at a Buddhist temple that we've been part of for many, many years. Both Vietbay Television and Diya TV broadcast on KAAP Channel 24, and we're very pleased both of you are here in studio for the special debate. We're going to keep things simple. We're going to have just topic-based questions. The topics will run roughly 5 minutes. We're going to try to balance the time and have a conversation between the three of us. And honestly, I'd like the two of you both to engage with one another to talk about the issues facing San Jose. Certainly, the choice is yours to see who you would like to lead the city moving forward. Of course, for those of you that are not in San Jose is the 10th largest city in the United States. About 1 million people plus live here, a very dynamic place, of course, the heart of Silicon Valley. So what happens in San Jose definitely has ramifications and repercussions all over the country. So we'll start right to the first topic. And of course, after the topics, we'll get into just a closing statement for 1 minute from each of you. So we've got to get into a topic that frankly I see all over the country, and that is the homeless crisis. Every major city is dealing with it. COVID exacerbated things. I do see this as a wedge issue, an issue that political leaders across the board, all over the country, are running on. So I wanted to get your perspective. San Jose certainly had an increase in homelessness. I know you both are talking about this topic at every town hall you go to. So give us the bullet points about what you plan to do to address the homeless crisis. Matt, since I see you right in front of me, we'll start with you.
Sure. Well, thanks, Ravi, for having us. Really appreciate it. And there's no doubt, I mean, homelessness has gotten worse. It is a national issue, but we have particularly high rates of unsheltered homeless individuals in our community. There are other cities in the country, such as Boston, that have done a much better job of getting people indoors. And I think we need a change in approach. I think that our current strategy of building very expensive, brand new apartments at one end of the spectrum and then spending a tremendous amount of money, $60,000 per person per year, just managing the symptoms of street homelessness, is not working really well. I think we need to rapidly scale up more cost-effective shelter, interim solutions, and get people indoors because it's more humane. They'll have better outcomes personally, and it'll be better for the whole community. So I'd like to see us actually change some of our spending priorities on this issue to scale up more temporary and interim shelter faster to end the epidemic of street homelessness first, because I think people are much better off if we can get them indoors into managed environments faster than we can.
Yeah, I thank you so much for hosting us. And I just want to say that, recognizing that this is such a serious problem, and it's a problem in many, many respects. It's a humanitarian crisis for the people that are homeless. It has a huge impact on the city in terms of its neighborhoods, streets, creeks and parks. And people in our community want to see that we're getting the job done, like that we really are addressing homelessness. Since 2015, as a community, we've housed about 20,000 people. About 35% of those people are in new homes. Almost everybody else are in naturally affordable housing or affordable housing that we already had available. We have 10,000 people that we still need to house. We need to use multiple strategies. One, we absolutely need to have more permanent supportive housing, because once you have somebody in temporary shelter, it's temporary shelter. You're trying to get them into permanent housing. So there's an absolute role for interim housing. In fact, I, as a member of the Board of Supervisors, have been investing both in that and permanent shelter. And one thing I'll just add is that, one of the things that we're really challenged by is that for every 2 people we've been housing, 3 people have been becoming homeless. And in our community, we have 600 families that are becoming homeless a year. We have a higher percentage of women that are homeless in our community. And so clearly we need to continue to move as fast as we can to get people housed as quickly and as safely as we can. When people are housed, one of the things that we're finding, even if they're seriously mentally ill, we're spending less on both in terms of services and housing them than what it costs us to keep them on the street. It's about $63,000 to keep them on the street. This is a relatively old study. But $20,000 in services plus housing is still less than what we're spending now. So we're really focused on getting people who are seriously mentally ill as quickly off the streets as we can, because we think that's an overall cost savings here. One last thing, let me just add, because this is such a complex topic. I know that people in our community are saying, how is it possible that you've housed that many people and we still have so many people who are homeless? One of the things I'd like to make sure that the city of San Jose does is that once a homeless encampment is cleared, once people have services, either permanent or temporary services, that area not be repopulated by the homeless again, because I think we need to show the public our work. I think they want their trails back and their parks back, and they should have them.
So let me follow up with both of you. I have some close friends that have been in San Jose for decades. I went to school with them, and I ran into them at an alumni event last week, and they told me they left the Bay Area after being here for 50, 60 years. They grew up in the Willow Glen area, and they saw the encampments right outside their neighborhood, a block away, and they're raising 2 young daughters. And the father told me, he says, I just couldn't do that to my family, and they went to Southern California. So what do you do in these situations? Well, let's face it, I mean, I've seen negative population growth. Now, that's not necessarily the end of the world because we've been growing so fast as a state, but the reality is a lot of it is attributed to public safety and homelessness. So, Matt, I'm going to let you start off because I want to give you more time on this matter. I mean, what do you do in those situations where, very visceral videos are coming out and saying, hey, look at Seattle, look at San Francisco, look at San Jose, and what's plaguing the streets?
Yeah, I mean, I hear this every day. In fact, one of the most common refrains I hear from voters is, we don't want to become San Francisco. And I understand that. I think that this is why we need a change in direction. I don't think it is realistic for us to build brand new apartments at a cost of $800,000–900,000 a door to end our homelessness crisis. If you look at cities in the country that have brought down rates of street homelessness, people being out unsheltered in tents and cars and so forth, what they have in common is they're shelter-first cities. They scale up basic, cost-effective shelter. It needs to be well managed, it needs to be dignified. But I think we should place the priority on getting people indoors, not letting the perfect be the enemy of the good. At the current rate, building brand new apartments that take about 5 years to bring online and soon $1 million a door because it's going up every year, we're never going to catch up. I mean, we've continued to see the number of people living on the streets grow. We had an 11% increase in the last count. So we're going in the wrong direction. I think we need to acknowledge that while we have helped a lot of people, and folks are certainly working hard on the problem, our solutions aren't scaling fast enough or cost effectively enough. And so I think we need more indoor places for people to go, starting with interim shelter that can be built with prefabricated modular units that cost $25,000 a piece, can be deployed on government-owned land around the county. The solution needs to be spread out around the county. It can't all be in San Jose. And that can offer people an individual room with a door that locks, with their own bathroom at a fraction of the cost of what we've been doing. I think getting people indoors first should be the priority. We also know that we need more inpatient placements for addiction, for mental illness. We still have a fraction of the inpatient placements we should have here in our county, despite being one of the wealthiest counties in the country. So I really think the priority needs to be on scaling up indoor places for people to go and helping people transition inside as quickly as possible. I think our current strategy is too expensive and too slow, and you see the results every single day all over our city.
Yeah, and I think this is such an important topic. It's something that at all the meet and greets that I've gone to, I don't think this hasn't come up. And so I think the point about your friends and what makes people feel comfortable and safe, and whether or not they still have faith and hope in this community, that is so important. As it relates to how we're addressing this, it is true that we need to build interim housing. I'm supportive of that. But I think one of the mistakes that California made, and it made it for generations, was building one type of housing. We built a lot of luxury housing. We didn't build along the entire continuum of affordability. And what that meant is that if you're on a fixed income, that there aren't very many places that you can live where the rent is controlled. And I think part of the reason we're seeing so many more women homeless in this community is because we have more older people whose fixed incomes don't keep up with the rent. We have a lot of people who are working multiple jobs how much they pay of their paycheck for rent is supposed to be about 30%. They're paying 50, 60, 70% of their overall income to stay housed. So what it means is that we have to be able to walk and chew gum at the same time. We have to be able to get people into the housing that's available now. We have to build more of it along that affordability continuum because we didn't do it, and we absolutely need interim homes. And I just want to emphasize that those interim homes have to be places we can stabilize people and then put them someplace permanently. The reason you need so many different components and so many different levers is there is no one silver bullet to addressing this issue. It is way too complex. There are 10,000 stories on the street right now. We need to get all of them housed.
We'll move on to another interconnected issue, and that would be housing prices. I mean, it's been a problem as long as I've been in the Bay Area, which is my entire life. Certainly for a lot of families, it seems unattainable, but now it does seem somewhat out of reach unless you have an incredible job making six figures plus. And I know many families who are making that kind of income and they feel uncomfortable to buy a house. You can only imagine what the average person who has a quote unquote regular job feels right now trying to buy something regionally. And all this also goes back to transportation, and we'll get into that as well. Do we have concrete ideas about how to solve this, knowing full well that San Jose has largely been an area where folks have resided? It is very spread out. We have people living in all pockets of this community, and then they end up commuting to the East Bay and to the peninsula and back and forth. Talk about San Jose's role in providing enough shelter for this community that's been growing and growing for decades. Cindy, we'll go with you first.
Yeah, thank you for that. Absolutely. And let me just make a point that cities have an incredibly important role to play in making it possible for people to live in this community. How do they do that? By making sure that we're permitting as much housing as possible and doing that in collaboration with neighborhoods. And one of the challenges is the city of San Jose over the last 10 years has made choices in terms of how it structured the general plan that dramatically dropped the number of housing permits by 25% over the last 10 years. They made another rule change that you could only bring general plan change amendments once a year. And what that means is that it slows housing down, some projects for years because of those changes. I'd like to change the general plan to make it easier for us to permit housing, change the process to make it easier for projects to get through that process. The other challenge we have is our Planning, Building, and Code Enforcement Department, which is the nerve center of the city of San Jose, has 26% less staff than it needs to have. So we need to expand our public-private partnership, make sure we're clearing that backlog, restructure that department so we're keeping the best and the brightest so that they are able to move those permits as quickly as possible. The city of San Jose should be a catalyst for affordable housing, and part of the way you catalyze that is you remove rules and remove barriers that are unnecessary for the health and safety and well-being of our community.
This housing crisis is a self-inflicted wound. We have seen job growth at a rate of 6 jobs for every 1 home we've built. And we need to step back and learn from history and recognize what's gone wrong. We have effectively, through a series of very well-intended regulations and processes and fees and taxes, increased the cost of construction, the cost to build so high that in many cases, those who build housing can't even get a loan from a bank to build it because they can't get enough on the other side to make it pencil out. So we've got to learn from years of public policy failures. Supervisor Chavez mentioned that we are only building luxury apartments or luxury condos, but why? The reason is that we've made it so expensive to build. The only thing you can afford to build for as a developer is the high end of the market. And so real solutions to our housing crisis have got to focus on bringing down the cost of construction, which means permitting faster. It means streamlining our processes. We have all well-intended, but environmental reviews and labor rules and historical preservation rules and on that just create such a complex process that it can take years to get approved to build the very housing we want right where we want it, in places like downtown San Jose, next to a future BART station. And so we've got to dramatically streamline the processes by which folks get permits to build. We've got to be willing to build up. We've got to be more flexible about allowing for more affordable by design solutions, such as for young people, more shared space, kind of like dorm style living. We're going to have to take a radically different approach if we're going to address this huge imbalance that we've created between job growth and housing production. It's fundamentally about supply and demand. There's no amount of taxing ourselves to build publicly subsidized housing that's going to get us out of this mess. We're short tens and tens of thousands of units just here in the South Bay. And so we need to actually roll back many of those barriers that we face today, because we've basically broken the housing production market in our region.
I know California recently changed some laws to loosen things up in terms of development, but is there really a will to put more development out there? Because let's face it, I talk to a lot of public officials and they'll tell me off to the side, I don't know if my neighborhood wants to put in 5,000 units over the next 10 years, let alone the 50,000 we need. So is there a will to actually do this, Matt?
Well, I've helped move forward a number of projects in my district, and to be fair, my district down in South San Jose doesn't have great transit infrastructure, but near areas where there's more walkability, where there are bus routes, where there's retail so people can make more of their trips out of the home, walking or biking. I think those are very appropriate areas to build, and I have been willing to make the case for smart growth. I think the way to bring the public along with us and build buy-in for the growth that we need to see, the housing we need to see for our kids and grandkids to be able to afford to live here, is to focus it in areas that have infrastructure for transit, that have retail, that are more walkable. We're going to have to change that old ideal is the sprawling suburban development pattern that we've had. And there's nothing wrong with that, but future growth cannot double down on sprawl or kind of low density development. We're going to need to build up in places like downtown San Jose and along our high frequency transit corridors, especially in mixed use urban villages where people can walk out of the home to more of the trips that they need to make to the grocery store, the daycare center, or whatever it might be. And so I really think we have to make this case to the public for responsible, smart growth that doesn't worsen our quality of life, because people are right to be worried about traffic and air pollution and parking. I mean, these are significant issues that affect people's health and their well-being and their stress levels on a daily basis. So we need a smart growth plan that people can get behind.
I think that one of the challenges is that we're not treating the community or neighborhoods as partners. And I think what a lot of people feel like is that projects come up and they're surprised by them, or the size of them they're surprised by, or they weren't able to give feedback to how the traffic mitigations were going to need to be done. And all of that is partly why I think the point you're raising about neighbors or even elected officials saying this is a tough partnership, and part of it is of our own making, I think. The city has an opportunity, and that is that many, many years ago, we had a sunshine ordinance that alerted people when there were going to be developments. We did pre-planning through a program called the Strong Neighborhoods Initiative, where we worked with neighborhoods to come up with the design guidelines, the role they would like to see development in their neighborhoods. And so when a developer came in, the neighborhood was able to give them the plan that had all that information in it. And I think that's part of how you make a process that's much more partnership oriented. Now, another point that I think is really, really critical, and that is this. The Valley Transportation Authority has 200 acres that they're doing RFPs for to allow for housing and jobs to be built right on transportation nodes, 200 acres. These are areas where we can build densely. The VTA has a policy of allowing or having 35% of all of that housing be affordable. By the way, something that I requested, that they not sell the land and that they build in those affordability covenants so that you're creating neighborhoods that are more integrated and creating more opportunities for young families to be able to get into housing, either to be able to buy it or to save money to be able to move into their permanent, where they want to be permanently. All of that is something that we as elected officials have an opportunity to really engage the community instead of making people feel like they're victims of development. And we have much more work to do, and I think the city of San Jose can play a leadership role in doing that.
Next topic, also connected, transportation. Here we are in Silicon Valley. It has done phenomenally well. I mean, I don't think I'm going to spend a whole lot of time on jobs, frankly, in this forum, because I think we've had an incredible situation economically, but the impact on our transportation systems have been grave. I mean, I have not seen an improvement in transportation really in my lifetime. Certainly BART extending has helped a little bit, but as I think we kind of joke commonly, BART's great if it's going where you're actually going. Otherwise, if you see the way other major cities in New York and Washington, Chicago are great examples where it can pretty much get you where you need to go. San Jose is nowhere close to where it needs to go if I want to go from Santana Row to Evergreen, or from Coyote Valley to North San Jose. I mean, good luck. So ideas on how to fix this, knowing all the constraints that you have to deal with. Matt, why don't you start us off?
Sure. So for commuters, given that we're seeing a lot of interest in downtown San Jose and North San Jose, I think that fixed rail systems like BART, we're spending billions to bring BART through downtown all the way to Diridon Station. When I was on the board of the Silicon Valley Leadership Group, I helped advocate to secure federal funding to electrify Caltrain. So I think that's a critical corridor for those business commuters. Part of what we have to do, though, is back to your last question, be really smart about land use. We need to concentrate job and housing growth in mixed-use urban villages and places like downtown San Jose so that we aren't just simply putting more cars on the road every time we add a home. That is part of what has made our traffic so unbearable and really harmed people's quality of life. I have huge concerns about a light rail system that is incredibly slow, has gotten slower year over year, and where the per passenger trip subsidy is extremely high. We're at the point where we could almost give people a voucher to just get into an Uber. So we're going to need to really do some experimentation with light synchronization and prioritization and making these trains run faster. We know frequency is huge. People don't take transit if the frequency is less than about 20 minutes. And so we have a lot of those bus and light rail lines out there where you're lucky to have a train or bus come by every 45 minutes. That's just not going to cut it. People aren't going to take transit when the frequency is so low. So we need to invest in increasing frequency. But you're right, fixed rail doesn't necessarily get you where you need to go, which is why I'm a big proponent of buses. I've relied on buses at many points in my life as a student and a young adult. I also think we have to embrace innovation in the mobility space. We have a lot of exciting technology being built right here in our backyard, autonomous and electric vehicles that will be smaller, more flexible, more cost-effective than running bigger, heavier, traditional 20th century transit systems. And for moving around within a city or in the South Bay region, I think those kinds of technologies and creating the kinds of public right-of-way for us to be able to experiment and really facilitate that kind of innovation. San Jose should be the world's leading city for experimenting with mobility solutions because so many of them are being built right here in Silicon Valley. And I think we're going to have to embrace that if we're going to dramatically change the level of congestion and the slow commute times that people are experiencing today.
Well, since you are a Caltrain kid, I'm going to start off with just talking about Caltrain. And one of the most important things that I would say is that when we look at both Caltrain and BART, we have to remember that those systems carry thousands and thousands and thousands of people a day. That means people who are getting out of their cars, because the thing to remember about both BART and Caltrain is that often people who take BART or Caltrain are choice riders. They're not transit dependent, which means that we're getting them out of a car and into transportation. The other thing I'll just add is pre-COVID, Caltrain was moving 18 million trips a year. That's a lot. And imagine that is at least one lane of traffic on Highway 101. So we want to make sure that we're completing the electrification of Caltrain. I sit on that board and I'm very anxious to finish that work. I sit on the board of VTA, and getting BART all the way to the Diridon station is critical because that's going to be the most connected transportation hub really on the West Coast if you think about it, because it's going to have Caltrain, eventually high-speed rail, BART, light rail, and buses. And hopefully an airport connector. I know the city of San Jose did an RFP to determine how to get people from that Diridon station over to the airport, which everybody thinks would be great not to have to get in your car to go take that last trip. I think that, just to hone in on your question, the city of San Jose is 180 square miles, and it was designed by our forefathers, mostly fathers, to look like Los Angeles. So what we're doing now is we're retrofitting the transportation system so that we can move people from point A to point B. One really exciting thing I just want to add is that as we bring BART, that's going to increase the number of people who are taking light rail and buses, because it's going to be easier to get from your neighborhood to, if you're going to do some kind of inter-county modal transportation. to be able to get on them, because that's actually one of the problems is how do you get people out of their cars altogether. I think just one last thing I'll just add, and I think this is really critical, is aligning transportation with land use policy is critical. And right now, for every development that gets built, VTA gets asked what their transportation recommendations are, and no developer and no city has to take them. So as long as those two things stay decoupled, we're going to have a hard time getting everybody able to move in a more robust way through our economy.
I want to get 30 more seconds from each of you on just how San Jose can take leadership on this issue, because we've seen even Caltrain, that connectivity through the peninsula. I mean, we couldn't get BART through the peninsula at all. And then even getting down to Santa Cruz and Monterey is challenging. You need to have a vehicle. I mean, getting down, I can't even imagine taking public transportation down to other parts of the state. And these are places that we all like to go to frequent on the weekends. How can San Jose take a role into make sure we're truly interconnected, especially with all the folks that are aspiring to maybe come from the Central Valley to Silicon Valley? Matt?
Yeah, well, as the big city in the region, we have to take a leadership role in advocating for these investments in regional rail, regional bus. And one of the big challenges, as I think you're pointing to, is the lack of integration. We still have places in our larger system, because we have so many different transit systems and modalities, that we don't have proper timing, and we don't have synchronization. And so that's something that we have to fight for and make sure that everybody's working together to have a seamless transit system. But to your question about innovation, I actually think our greatest opportunity to innovate is transportation that is within the city. The vast majority of trips out of the home are non-commute related. They're about 5 minutes in distance. 7 out of 10 trips out of the home have nothing to do with traveling to work. They're going to the grocery store, the pharmacy, the laundromat, the school, the church, the daycare center, and building mixed-use urban villages, starting by really focusing on downtown and then embracing this innovation that we're seeing around autonomous electric vehicles, e-bikes, e-scooters, giving people different ways to get around. And really our role is to take that street that has traditionally been single occupancy vehicles and maybe, typically street parking, and instead create lanes that actually and spaces that embrace the kind of innovation that we're seeing, and actually allow for other kinds of vehicles to use those roadways. Because I really think that in 10 years we're going to look back and be shocked at how much transportation is going to change. But we need to lead on that, and that has to do with actually the physical space of our streets. And I think that should start in places like downtown San Jose.
Cindy, take as much time as you need to answer that as well.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think one great opportunity we have here is that so many of the innovators that are looking at what the new modes of transportation are right here. So people looking at electric flight to be able to both really fly and then be able to use that same vehicle to drive. That's the technology that we're seeing being developed in our region. Looking at new mapping systems, connecting those mapping systems to the transit both that we have now, but the transit that will be available. And I think one of the things that cities like San Jose can do is be open to being a place that these new vehicles can be tested. We're seeing that in San Francisco now with Cruise, that Cruise is doing their testing in different parts of the district very late at night, and you have to be able to sign up to be one of the participants in the automated vehicles. But those are opportunities just to be okay with being an open lab for that kind of technology and that change. One other thing that I'll add that I think would be a really great opportunity for us is to recognize that a lot of the new transportation opportunities are also very short in distance, meaning that, if you look at micromobility and you're looking at, for example, the Diridon station, that being able to move from point A to point B on an electric bike, a scooter, walking, closing streets down, that some of it is going to be a combination of accepting new technologies and then making changes to the infrastructure that's so, it's been around 100 years or more to make sure that it's available. I think this is an exciting time. We have so many people here who are approaching us with new innovative ideas, and part of the reason we're doing RFQs and RFPs and being very open about, instead of saying, here's the transit we want, We're saying, here's the problem we're trying to solve. And I think by asking that question, it really allows for public-private partnerships that we haven't seen before. Most of the technologies that I was talking about earlier are being invested in by NASA now, because they're recognizing that, you know, the air and the earth are going to need to connect very quickly as we look to the new technologies that are coming our way.
Okay, great. Well, I need to try to get a few more topics in here, and I know this is why this format's difficult, because there's a lot to discuss for a major city like this. Let's briefly talk about public safety, which I know is also another core issue. I'm sure you get this at every single symposium you guys both are part of. We see that displays of violence, solicitation get spread all over the country now. This is not, and I was talking to political leaders this weekend, and they said, well, 30 years ago, it wasn't like this. And I'm like, well, 30 years ago, we didn't all have a cell phone in our face saying this kind of graphic event is happening in this part of the country, and this is why you shouldn't vote for this party, which is, I think, we're seeing that polarization. Certainly San Jose is part of that framework. What can be done to improve public safety? Because certainly the overwhelming majority of your residents want to live in a peaceful, calm existence. They work so hard to stay here. How do we make sure that these folks feel like, hey, that our tax dollars are actually going towards a place that we can feel connected to? Cindy, why don't you start us off?
Yeah, thank you. When I served on the city council, and I left the council 16 years ago, San Jose was the safest big city in the country. And there were many reasons for that. But one of them is that we've always had a thinly staffed police department. But now we have 200 less officers than we did then. We have 100,000 more people than we did then. And our response times for priority 2 calls is actually double what it was when I served on the council. It used to take us less than 10 minutes to get to a priority 2 call. And that's if you've been, believe it or not, if you've been assaulted and the assailant isn't there anymore. Now it can take 20 minutes or nobody comes. And so one of the most important things that we need to do is make sure that we re-staff the police department. And we have to keep the standards very high. We want to hire the best and the brightest, but absent doing that, we're going to continue to be in an environment that's unsafe. Secondly is that we had a program where we funded after-school programming and summer programming, because and midnight basketball. We need to make sure that young people are very busy, that they're supervised, that they have a trusted adult that's going to help them succeed in their schooling, in their education, and in their life. And then lastly, we need to clean San Jose up, because the cleaner the city is, the safer it's going to be. We know across the country that you see violent crime drop dramatically, up to 30% in areas that have just reestablished those areas as being clean. It's a whole programmatic approach that we need to take. The city of San Jose over the last 5 years has spent $45 million a year on overtime. By taking a portion of that overtime, all of the things that I just talked about could be fully funded.
Public safety is my top priority. Everybody deserves to live in a safe and clean neighborhood, safe and clean city. And today we cannot offer that to all of our residents, which is part of the reason you're seeing people think about leaving our city, which breaks my heart. My top priority when proposing a budget as mayor will be increasing police staffing. We need to hire more police officers. One of the big challenges we face, though, one of the reasons we do not have more officers, as many officers as we had 15 years ago, is that elected officials 20 some years ago, including Supervisor Chavez, voted for unfunded and even retroactive benefits that ran up huge deficits. We have $4 billion in unfunded liabilities that we owe past city workers that we did not plan appropriately for or properly fund. And so today, 15% of our budget, $200 million a year, comes off the top to pay off that past debt. We could hire 1,000 more police officers today had past political leaders been more fiscally responsible. So I will prioritize adding more police officers, but also ensuring that we are being fiscally responsible so that we don't push service cuts off on future generations, which is what we're seeing right now. In addition to increasing police staffing, I've pushed to and successfully secured funding in our budget to increase automatic license plate readers, which are cameras that help us do enforcement, given that we have a thinly staffed police force. Those cameras can help with addressing smash and grab robberies and purse snatching and street racing and sideshows, so many of the challenges that we're seeing in our community today. And I'll also just add, on either side of enforcement, we need to make more investments and change some of the things we're doing. We need to invest in our children and after-school programming in our parks and libraries and jobs for at-risk youth, and help keep people on a positive trajectory so that they don't end up in the criminal justice system. And at the other end of an arrest, we need to hold our county accountable for doing a better job of intervening in cycles of criminality. Our police department, which is thinly staffed, is arresting many of the same people over and over again. Just in the last 24 months, our police department arrested or cited over 100 people over 10 times each. One guy was arrested or cited over 30 times. So that revolving door, if you want to call it that sort of repeat offense with a failure to intervene is a huge part of the problem, and part of why places like downtown San Jose do not feel safe enough today. And I will continue to be a strong advocate for appropriate intervention, which in many cases includes inpatient treatment that should be mandated by a judge for addiction, for mental illness, if that's the underlying cause of repeat offense. But we have far too much of this repeat crime and arresting the same people. It doesn't really matter how many police officers you have. If folks are released the same day they're arrested and they've failed to appear in court or they've reoffended, which the county's own data shows is happening almost 50% of the time today with people who are being released pre-trial. So we have huge problems around public safety. Police staffing is part of it, but it's everything else in the system as well.
Yeah, thank you for that. So first of all, let me just make an observation. Police staffing really matters. We know that if you need a call for service and you're waiting 20 minutes, that's too long. So it does matter how many police we have. It does matter how quick our response is. Second is, as it relates to arrests, because we have had so few officers, the percentage of arrests per officer have dramatically dropped, and that has been going on for years. And in part because they are so busy going to calls for service that they're unable to arrest everybody who they need to be able to respond to for crimes. The other thing I would just add is that as a member of the Board of Supervisors, I played a leadership role in expanding two programs, one that added more investigators, because the biggest challenge we have with repeat offenders, especially for serious crimes, is if you can't catch them and investigate those crimes. So we added investigators to the DA's office because the city of San Jose didn't have enough. In addition to that, we expanded a program called community prosecutors. So those community prosecutors could work with neighborhoods on everything from quality of life crimes to code enforcement, again, where the city has been understaffed. We've leaned in, and I've leaned in. And then finally, well, this isn't finally, but I want to add just one other thing. The county and the city, or the county of Santa Clara, unfortunately, we've seen an increase in domestic violence, sexual assault, and violent robberies countywide. In our county, we got rid of the backlog of rape kits that exist in so many other counties where they're not even being processed and not even being investigated. We don't have a backlog here in our county, and we test rape kits and the DNA from those kits faster than any other county in the country, based on a partnership that I have with the district attorney, Jeff Rosen, who has endorsed me. As it relates to public safety, I want to add one other thing. I have the endorsement of the San Jose Police Officers Association. Part of the reason for that is that they understand, and I understand, that we need to both recruit and retain new officers. And what I asked them when I ran is, were they going to be in for helping us do that? In part because the city of San Jose so poorly handled their relationship with the police that we lost hundreds of officers in a fight over pensions and benefits that could have been resolved, like grown-ups can resolve issues, and that didn't happen. And because of that, we lost hundreds of officers. And not only are we trying to catch up by hiring more police officers now, we have to woo people back to be part of one of the most, the strongest police departments in the country. San Jose wasn't just the safest big city in the country because we had, just smart thinking. We had great officers, and many of them have left and serve in all other parts of the state or the country because this has been such a difficult place for them to work, feel appreciated. And right now, I know they're going through contract negotiations. We'll see what the results of those are. But right now, the county, the city, all of us are working very hard to retain officers that we have and keep people, frankly, from retiring if we can keep them from doing it, so that as we're bringing on new officers, we maintain balanced police departments that have experienced people as well as new people.
Ravi, I'm sorry, I have to respond to it. I mean, look, I think the reality is that on both police staffing and those union contracts and on revolving door, I don't think you're getting the whole story here. I think part of the reason Supervisor Chavez is supported by the police union is because she's been willing, including in this current negotiation, to advocate for agreements that will run up unfunded liabilities, meaning debts that we will have to pay off in the future, which means hiring freezes. We had to do layoffs as a city because we literally could not afford to pay our officers because of the debts that we ran up. And I think we need to be really clear about the math. We have over $4 billion in unfunded liabilities. That is what has driven reductions in staffing. When I talk to our officers about their morale, about why arrests are down, what I hear clearly is that they are incredibly frustrated with the system that is failing to actually intervene around street level crime. And so you're seeing citations go up because it is not rational for a busy officer who has a lot of other calls to respond to take 4 hours to book somebody at the jail for them to be out the same day. It's just not a good use of police time. And so unless the rest of the system can be held accountable to better intervening, you're going to continue to see that those numbers go down and that level of frustration around repeat street level crime. I think that is the fundamental issue.
Well, yeah, thank you. I mean, I think that, first of all, I didn't intervene in the contract. I think that's just not accurate. Well, let me finish. Thank you, Mr. Mahan. It is true that I did a press conference, and my press conference was focused on the fact that we are in an environment where we have chronic overtime, which means that we're not giving officers the option. If they're at work, we're keeping them there longer because we don't have enough officers. So the point I was making, and I will continue to make, is that right now, without raising a single dime, the city has the opportunity to take overtime pay that they have right now and increase the number of officers that are available. The city of San Jose voted in this last June budget to add 20 new officers. And as I told you a little bit ago, we need 200 just to get back to where we were when I was there. 20 is a drop in the bucket. So what I was advocating for is to make sure that we're actually increasing the total number of officers, not pretending that we have enough to do the job today. And then the other thing I want to add is that as it relates to the votes that I took to protect the public safety of our community, those were votes that were taken unanimously by the council, including by Mayor Reed, who's endorsed Matt Mahan, and they were taken because at the time we were in a competitive environment trying to keep the best and the brightest. What happened is that we had a huge economic downturn. It impacted everybody around the world, and the city of San Jose chose to fight with their employees versus doing what every other institution in our county did, which was work with their employees to reduce the costs of their benefits, reduce the costs of their income, without losing people, without causing the kind of pain and suffering that was caused in the city of San Jose that we're still trying to resolve today.
Complicated matter, and we don't have much time for it, though. I'd love to continue this conversation because I think it's absolutely very, very important, not just in San Jose, but around the country.
I just want to note on overtime very quickly. Yeah. I'm happy to look at. I have also advocated that we should keep it as low as possible to fund more roles, but actually it is often providing targeted police support that we want, like foot patrols in commercial districts, targeted traffic enforcement on overtime, and is actually more cost effective in many cases than hiring new officers. So yes, overtime is an issue. We can probably hire more officers if we keep it down, but we should recognize that we will lose certain functions that are asked for by the community that are providing some targeted services on overtime. And so there's a trade-off there. We should be honest about that.
I think that's just slightly inaccurate in this sense that I'm not saying remove all overtime. Of course you need it. And of course every department needs the fungibility to be able to respond to emergencies and emerging trends and emerging needs. But $45 million over the last 5 years shows you that you have enough resources to hire more than 20 new officers. Not only did they say that, well, we're going to hire 20 in June, but for the next 5 years, we're only going to hire 15 officers a year. We could go to 45 easily. We have to make sure we keep the bar high because we do want to hire the best and the brightest, but this is a really important issue. And the one job that government has, the most important job we have, is making sure that people are safe and that we're protecting civil rights, doing both of those things at the same time. San Jose is failing at that.
Well, I'm glad we saw some of the gloves come off here a little towards the end of this debate here, because it's an important topic, and I want to end with one more subject before we get into our closing statements, and this is also connected. Hate crimes, specifically against Asian Americans. We've seen an unbelievable run-up. I've never seen so many really in my lifetime, but certainly folks that have a likeness of East Asians, they've been targeted during this COVID period, but now we're even seeing South Asians getting targeted because of their faith, and I've noticed, at least in my reporting, that a lot of this stems from foreign governments. So the impacts of foreign governments, that has ramifications to the nationals here. So there's an implication often that if your lineage is from overseas, that you're connected to those governments, and some of that stuff ends up here in the Bay Area or nationally, and people get targeted. And so I wanted to get your sense on how do we address that. It probably goes back to all these same issues we've been talking about. All of this is connected. Cindy, why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, this is an excellent question. At the county, we established a hate crimes and inclusion task force. And the reason we did that was we were seeing an increase in hate crimes, both in the Asian community and in the Latino community. And I think, and we brought together a very, very diverse group of leaders to be able to look at how to address this. One of the things that we learned is that people just don't report these crimes. So they don't report hate incidences and they don't report hate crimes. And we're trying to figure out how to do a better job of creating an opportunity for people to report those crimes. So what we're working on is creating a warm line, essentially, so people can report those crimes. And that warm line can determine whether or not it's a crime or a hate incident, and then what to do about it. I'm very excited about that body of work. I think it's extremely important. The other thing we're looking at doing here is doing more on the prevention side, getting more engaged at a school level, at a younger level, to help people understand how important it is to respect the environment they live in and respect all the people who live here. One of the most important things about this region is that San Jose was one of the first large cities in the country to become a majority of no single ethnicity. And the reason I take this issue so personally, and I think it's so important, is that we as a human race need to figure out how to live together, thrive, and prosper. And if San Jose and Santa Clara County can do that, it means that more places all around the world can do that. And it will be necessary. We're going to see much more migration because of climate change than we've ever imagined. We're going to see much more stress because of lack of resources. Digging in and making sure that this is a place that really respects each other is one of my highest priorities.
I think San Jose is such a special city because we've done a better job of welcoming people from all over the world into a city that has provided upward mobility, economic opportunity, a high quality of life for people from all different backgrounds, races, ethnicities, religions, and it is of paramount importance that we continue to be that kind of welcoming and inclusive city that creates a better future for everyone. And so I think it is just so important that we are frequently talking about the strength of our diversity, encouraging our community members to take advantage of the public safety resources we have and all of the other services that we have to address hate crimes specifically. Clearly, we have to prosecute them to the fullest extent of the law. We need to, as we increase police staffing and hire more officers, we need to work really hard to make sure that that police force reflects the true diversity of our city and that our council members reflect the diversity of our city, because we know that representation matters and that having a diverse council and a diverse police force will be better in tune with and responsive to the needs of all of our different communities. And specifically, increasing police staffing will give us the capacity to do more community policing, to have officers out in our commercial districts and out in our neighborhoods, building relationships with everyone in our community. And we've seen the power of that right here in Vietnam Town, where we had a crime ring that was targeting older Asian American women to steal their purses and knocking them down, assaulting them. And it was because we put the police capacity, the staffing focused on that issue and used camera technologies and effectively did a sting operation that we were able to actually go identify some of the perpetrators of that crime and hold them accountable. And so we have to be very engaged in our community and responsive to those needs and make sure that we're actually holding people accountable for committing these crimes and making an example out of them and making it very clear that we as a city will not tolerate hate crimes, hate speech, or any divisiveness that tries to pit different racial and ethnic groups against one another.
Let's go to our closing statements. Matt, you have the first word, so I'm going to let Cindy have the last word. Why don't you start us off with the closing statement, then Cindy, please follow.
Sure, and I know we're keeping this to a minute. I'll just say this. I appreciate the opportunity. I hope your audience will learn more about our campaign at mayhanforsanjose.com, which is our website where there's a lot more information about my plans for addressing homelessness, crime, trash, affordable housing, so many of the challenges we face. But to me, the bottom line is that we pay a lot in taxes. Every year we're asked on the ballot to raise taxes or pass another bond and to keep asking you all to give us more money in government. And I'm running because I'm frustrated, because I think that for too long we've been going in the wrong direction with the same solutions that aren't delivering the outcomes we want. And I'm really running to hold City Hall accountable for setting goals, for measuring progress. And I think that as elected officials and top administrators, that our pay raises should be tied to performance. I think we should have to prove to you in a measurable way, just like any business or frankly most nonprofits operate these days, we should have to focus, set a finite number of goals, demonstrate progress, or we shouldn't get a pay raise. I think there is a lack of accountability at the city and the county for these big issues of homelessness and crime. And it's not until we are held accountable in government that you're going to see different policies that produce different outcomes. So that's really what this revolution of common sense that we're running is all about. And once again, I hope people will go to mayhanforsanjose.com to learn more and get involved with our campaign. So thank you again for the opportunity.
Yes, thank you so much for hosting us. And I would just really appreciate the opportunity and have appreciated the opportunity to get to talk to all of you today. One of the things that I would just observe is that San Jose is a place that we could do so much more. And, like many of you, I love this city. I have faith in this city. I have faith in all of us that we can make San Jose safer, cleaner, more affordable, and address homelessness. Of that, I am totally confident. I have 9 out of the 10 members of this current city council who've endorsed me. Some are to the left of me, some are to the right of me, but with almost every one of them, I've had significant opportunities to work with them and have results. What do I mean by results? I mean being able to test DNA kits faster than any place in the country. I mean making sure that if you dial our child advocacy number, that you're going to get a phone picked up right away by a real person. That used to not happen. I mean that we saved and preserved 451 hospital beds and 2 emergency rooms. Those are real results. I'm running for mayor of San Jose because I want to bring real results to the people who live, work, and play here. Thank you for letting me join you.
Thank you both. This was very generous of you to come here and speak to our communities, and really appreciated the dialogue, because I know these are challenging topics, and I know there's about a half dozen other topics that I wanted to get into, but couldn't get to it on this particular forum. But thank you so much, Matt Mahan, Cindy Chavez. Best of luck to you both in November, and for all of you at home watching, please go out and vote. It's important. I know the midterms usually turnout is suppressed, but I think it's very important. There's a lot of local races like this mayoral race that are very, very pivotal for you to participate in. I'm Ravi Kapur for everyone at Vietbay, Diya TV, and KAAP Channel 24. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.